Hello and welcome all. A very warm welcome to all of you joining us today on the seventh edition of Anubhav. Just a general announcement. You can keep your microphone off when not in use, and you can please keep your video on so that we can see each other. This session is supposed to be interactive, so you can keep also your video off if your network are unstable. Regarding question answers, you can either raise your hand or unmute yourself at your turn to ask the question, or you can simply text in the chat box the moment you have the question side by side during the session and can ask after the sharing by the guest today. So let's begin. Let me share screen. Unima Puppeteer Trust India is the national center of the International Association of the Puppeteer, UNIMA or UNIMA, which says Union International de la Marinette, is the platform for exchange and networking to share between people who practice puppetry, work on this art, and are passionate about this art. UNIMA is present in more than 90 countries. It is one of the oldest international theater organization in the world. UNIMA is a non-government organization affiliated to UNESCO. Its members who come from all over the world contribute to the development of puppetry arts. It also supports meetings, conferences, exchanges, and collaboration opportunities to operate with people in all areas of puppetry like therapy, teaching, training, research, documentation, collections, exhibitions, etc., and supports collecting and distributing information and publication about research, courses, and workshops. We have our exclusive digital publication called Sutradhar, which is available on our website called unimapuppeteertrust.in. You can find it all the 16 edition here for free. And we have also our publication, the newsletter. We have 8 editions so far, and it's available free for access. Our digital video documentation and video library are available on our official YouTube channel called @Puppeteers Trust. You can find most of the Indian puppetry documentaries, glimpses from masterclasses conducted so far, and all the previous Anubhav sessions there for free. This is the seventh edition of Anubhav. Anubhav is an attempt by Unima Puppeteers Trust India, where we meet the puppeteers, master puppeteers, and traditional and contemporary practices, explorer, practitioners, trainer, mentors, therapists, filmmaker, enthusiasts in puppetry world, one-on-one live on online platform to know each other closely, getting inspiration and learning by sharing the experiences and to build the better networking with strong groups. Now, I welcome my co-host of the day today, puppeteer and the General Secretary of Unima Puppeteers Trust India from Hyderabad, Mrs. Padmini Rangarajan, to take over and please welcome and introduce our guest of the day today, Andrew Kim, and proceed the segment ahead. Over to you, ma'am.
Thank you, Manish. Namaste and welcome all to this wonderful edition of Anubhav series during Navratri, where we have dolls and other things going on and something related. I take this pleasure to give brief introduction about Andrew Kim, our resource person for today. Andrew Kim creates touring Jain puppets and street theater acts, builds puppets for commissions, and teaches Jain puppet making and performing. Andrew was born in Korea, raised and educated in USA, and immigrated to UK in 2006. He started as a puppeteer within the heart of the Beast Theatre, Bread and Puppet Theatre, and Horse and Bamboo before starting Thingumajig. Did I pronounce it rightly? Theatre with his wife, Kathy. Andrew has created and performed puppets and performance for 30 years in 21 countries throughout Europe, Asia, North America, including several television shows and North America television shows and a Disney feature film. He will be teaching a giant puppet masterclass in New Delhi. He is in New Delhi now at British Council from 7th October, that is from tomorrow to till 20th October, and then in Kerala at Ala from 28th October to 8th November 2024. Hearty welcome to you, Andrew, and over to you. And you all, after, if you have any questions as such, you can use the chat box. And once the presentation is over from the Andrew side, we open for interaction. Welcome once again.
Thank you very much, Padmini, for the introduction, and thank you so much, Manish, for organizing this. Also, thanks for Ranjana for hosting me. I'm actually upstairs in her house right now in New Delhi, and I'll be here for 2 weeks and making some new giant puppets with some Indian art puppeteers from India for the next 2 weeks. So I'm really looking forward to that. It's my first time in India, and it's really great to be here and just get a sense of the place. And then I'll start teaching a workshop tomorrow, and then I'll be down in Kerala and teaching another workshop. But I am based, as Padmini said, I'm based in England, in West Yorkshire, England, in the north of England, where my wife, Kathy, and I make and perform puppets. And increasingly, I've been also doing quite a lot of teaching as well. So that's been a real pleasure as well. So if you don't mind, well, thank you so much for taking the time to join me. And I see there's a few people from various parts of the world. If you haven't, in case you just joined us late, do put your greeting from in the chat and say where you're from. That's fantastic. It's really nice to see an interest in our work. So in a minute or so, I'm going to just share a presentation, and I'll show you some pictures of our work and talk a little bit about what we do, talk a little bit about the different kinds of puppets that we make. We'll show a couple of short videos, in which case Manish will take control of the screen and put a couple of videos on. And then I'll talk a little bit about how I started, and then finally I'll talk a little bit about the process. I've got 2 different kinds of giant puppets I wanted to show you. Oh, can somebody's on mute? Can you be on mute if you don't mind, if you're not? Thank you. Yeah. So if yes, so I'll talk a little bit about the build process, and then I'll open it up to questions right towards the end. So if I see it, if it's I'll answer questions along the presentation, but for sure we'll hit you at the end as well. All right. So if that's all right, I'm gonna go to screen. I'm gonna share my screen. Hold on 1 second, please. I'm going to get to the beginning here. There we go. And I'm going to press play. Okay, there we go. So, can everybody see me with a big muskox? Thumbs up? Yes? Okay, great, fantastic. We're in business. All right, so as I said, we are a street theater company, mostly giant puppets, based in the north of England, and we make and perform our own puppets. And these are some examples of our street theater acts. And a lot of these puppets, like the hippo and the dodos and the giant chicken, in fact, the giant chicken is out today somewhere in Croydon, south of London, performing as we speak, I think probably. But I'm not there, obviously, but some of our colleagues are. And we go to events and festivals, and we interact with the audience. We animate. It's just a bit of fun. Sometimes it's a bit of storytelling. Sometimes it's just giant puppets interacting. At this point, I'm going to show you a little short video of the dodos. So Manish, can you show the dodos videos? I think I have to stop sharing, don't I?
Sure.
Okay. This is an example of the dodos at work. I hope that was all right. The sound was a bit bumpy for me, but I hope that you get a sense of that. I'll get back to my presentation. Okay, one second. So, in addition to giant puppets that interact like the dodos, like you just saw, we also have a few street theater shows where we oftentimes we start with like this show here. This is called Kitten Caboodle, and this is a pack mule, and the pack mule is full of suitcases and bags, and it arrives into a place, and then we gather the audience, and then we do a show. This is a show that has 3 different stories about migration and people coming from different places in the world and living somewhere else. So one of them is a Irish folk tune. That's the Cranky that's on the top of your right screen. And then another one is a woman from South Sudan who leaves a warring country and arrives in Europe. And then another one is a sort of story about a wordless piece about a child that leaves her home in Sorry?
Yes,
Oh.
has the letter that they speak about gone to these people, or is it still in draft, or what is it? That was not clear.
Can we mute?
Yeah, Manish, why don't you mute Dadi?
Okay, sorry, that was confusing. I thought that was a question. Anyway, and so this is a street theater piece that has puppets, but also has a storytelling element as well. And then here is our latest show, which is a collection of stories that are built on the back of these tricycles. For instance, one of them is a hand puppet show and one of them is a humanette. And so we are a very mobile puppet show that we can set up and perform just about anywhere. We also do these nighttime lantern puppets, and this is a show called Ghost Caribou, and this is what I've been teaching a lot of. In fact, I'm in New Delhi here, and we're going to be making some giant lantern insect puppets in the next 2 weeks. And this is a slightly different process. Of course, giant puppets as always, but they're internally illuminated with LED lights. And so we have these are called Ghost Caribou. They're these giant puppets about 4 meters tall, and they once again interact with people, create a bit of an audience, and then do a shadow puppet show. And then you can see on the bottom right, and this is gather a crowd, and we do. So this is even though it's our own story, but obviously we're drawing from lots of traditions, such as traditions from shadow puppet shows that might be coming from parts of Asia, but also giant creatures that are part animal, part human, part spirit. And we took a lot of inspiration from some of the costume and masquerade from bits of Europe like Bulgaria and Portugal and Austria, where at certain times of the year these people come that are part human and part animal, come to maybe do a blessing, maybe scare away evil spirits, and also of course in parts of Asia as well. And so at this point I'll stop sharing. If we could show a little bit, Manesh, if you could show a little bit of the video for Ghost Caribou, please. I hope the sound's a bit better this time. Fantastic. All right, I'll get back into the presentation. Okay, where are we? And play. Okay, so in addition to making our own giant puppets that we perform, such as the ghost caribou and the dodos, and the mule puppet, Kit and Caboodle, we also make puppets for commissions. And so here's some examples of puppets that we've made for clients. For instance, up on the top left, you will have a phoenix that we made for the Manchester Day Parade. Below that is an owl puppet that we made for Chester Zoo. And then that, of course, also a lantern puppet. And then here on the right is a sea monster, which was made for an outdoor opera, which is quite fun. And then here's some other puppets that we've made on commission. And to the left, actually, that's in Manchester as well, although it might not seem that way. We made a puppet for a Manchester parade for a Kerala association. Of course, I took some inspiration from a Kathakali dancer. And then here are some lantern puppets that we've made. This is an orangutan and a lion. Also lantern puppets, and that was also for the Chester Zoo. They have a winter event about Christmas time, and they've been a really good client of ours, commissioning us to make puppets for their interactive displays. And also, in addition to making puppets for clients, we also teach workshops, giant puppet workshops, like I'm about to do here in New Delhi. And here's an example. We did this in Plovdiv, Bulgaria. We worked with these Bulgarian artists and taught them how to make some giant bird puppets, these two and another one, and helped them for their capital of culture that happened a few years back in Bulgaria. And we made a parade together with these puppets. Here's some other examples of some lantern puppets that I've made in communities. The one on the left is made for the University of East London. On the right, there's a rooster that we made for a carnival near Prague, Rostoki Carnival, and this was really fun. We had sort of an opposite of a lantern parade. Most lantern parades happen in the evening, of course, but this one was a dawn parade. We started in the dark, before dawn. We woke up, ran around and woke up as many people as we could saying, the carnival's coming, the carnival's coming. And then, of course, we had chickens and roosters, and then, and because later in the day was the actual carnival parade. And then down below that is a alligator snapping turtle that we made in New Orleans last year. No, actually 2 years ago. no, it was last year, about this time last year. And that is a very interesting, almost looks like a dinosaur. It's actually a real, not that big, but it's actually a real turtle that looks very much like a dinosaur, some sort of sea creature. And here's some other puppets that we've made recently. That's a woolly mammoth in Iowa. This to the left was a dragon that we made in Geneva, Switzerland, and then this reindeer it was made in Norway last year. And then another example of a lovely project. We worked with this group of Morris dancers, which is a folk dance tradition in England. This is in Shrewsbury, and we worked with the dance community dance company, and we created a whole new mythology about a cobbler who saved Shrewsbury. And so they made a story, they made new songs, they made new dances, and then we worked together. Another person to mute? Yes. Okay, we got it. So the giant puppet we worked together to make the giant puppet, and then so we created a whole performance. So something that felt like an old traditional performance, but actually was something we had made up. Now I'm going to go back in time and talk a little bit about how I got to make giant puppets, how sort of my origin story. This is a picture of me in 1992, so about 32 years ago. I was right out of college in Minnesota in the USA. I moved to Minneapolis, which is a city in the Midwest, upper Midwest, and there's a puppet theater called In the Heart of the Beast Puppet and Mask Theater. And I wasn't necessarily planning to be a puppeteer. I was just I actually studied to be a writer. I wanted to be a writer, but I had always done theater and dance just sort of for fun. I really enjoyed it. I did a lot of acting and directing while I was a student. And then because of this, I had developed an interest in not traditional Asian theater, but also Asian American theater. And there was a company in Minneapolis that was starting up. One of the directors, because his experience was traditional Korean mask theater, he was asked to direct a show for this puppet company. And so he decided to ask me, because he knew that I was just moving up to help start his company. And so he asked me to be a part of this puppet show, which was this show here. And I had never done puppets before, but I just sort of very luckily got a job in a puppet show. And anyway, this company really liked me and then offered me another job and another job. And pretty soon it was, the puppet sort of took over, and I never really looked back. And I did try to become a writer, but it was a bit boring compared to puppets. I like working with people and being creative with people and also having a deadline. Sometimes writing your own things, you're just by yourself and you have no deadline and you don't know when you're done. I couldn't really get things done that way. But having theater, of course, is lovely because it's a bunch of people and you have an absolute deadline. Opening is opening, isn't it? And you have to get it ready. And so somehow that helped me to be creative. And I spent about 10 years working with this company. And here's some of the puppets. We did a lot of indoor shows, but I also learned how to do giant puppets with this company. For instance, to the left is not my puppet, but it's sort of the big ceremony puppet that they have at a May Day parade and ceremony. And to the right are some of the puppets that I made while I was with them, such as these arm-stilted ants, which looked cool, but they were very, very difficult. And I felt sorry for the puppeteers that I put in there because they had to bend over for the whole parade. And then this tiger here, which actually started as several boxes that entered the stage and then formed to be a giant tiger when the boxes came together at a certain point in the ceremony. I also worked a little bit with Bread and Puppet, and I'm sure some of you are familiar with Bread and Puppet. Bread and Puppet is a U.S. political puppet company based in Vermont, upstate Vermont, and they have been very influential in a lot of puppet makers in the United States. Just their use of scale, landscape puppetry, their use of ensemble, their use of and some really using evocative images to create a very poetic and beautiful puppetry. And so I spent a bit of time. The company I had just spoke of before, In the Heart of the Beast, was started by people who were inspired by Bread and Puppet. So at some point, I went and studied with Bread and Puppet, spent a summer there, and then went on tour with them for an autumn, just to learn a little bit about the different styles of puppetry. So I did that for most of 10 years, working with In the Heart of the Beast, with a little spell of working with Bread and Puppet. But then after 10 years, I thought, oh, I wanted some more different influences. And so I ended up doing a few different things. I saved some money and I went to Bali. I went to Bali for about 2 months and I studied wood carving and I studied some traditional mask dance. Then I also went to Korea. My origin is, I was actually born in Korea, as Padmini told you, but I grew up in the US, so I had very little understanding of traditional art. In fact, my parents and my community in the US were very conservative Koreans who didn't really understand or didn't have any interest in traditional arts. And so I had to go back to Korea when I was in my early 30s and then see what traditional Korean arts was, and that was really fantastic. So the picture on the upper right is me. That's me in the green shirt, learning a monk mask dance. I learned 3 different styles of traditional mask theater. At the time, I was much more interested in masks and physical theater. I also, down below, you see, I did a little bit of clown training as well, Western clown training as well. So I was at a time where I was trying to get as many different influences as possible, finding things that were interesting to me and just learning a little bit of it and seeing what stuck and seeing, because I didn't want to just reproduce the puppetry that I had been a part of with Bread and Puppet and In the Heart of the Beast. I wanted to have some more things. And that's was a really important time in my life. Even though I don't do any traditional mask work, I think the relationship to the object, the relation to ceremony, the relationship to community, all of those things, the relationship to just treating objects as sacred things. I mean, all of that has become very important to my puppetry, and I'm really glad to have that experience. After that bit of traveling and studying, I decided to go to a new place. I decided I needed to leave Minneapolis, where I had been for 10 years, in order to just sort of try my own hand. And so I moved to Seattle, Washington, in the Northwest United States. And I had my hand at going and creating some large-scale puppets, doing some large-scale community events. This is an event called the Summer Solstice Pageant that I helped to start, and we did this for a few years. And this is sort of a totemic puppet of Seattle. And when I thought in Seattle, what would be something that people can relate with, what is the rain? And it rains quite a lot in Seattle, and so I made this rain bear. And this was a nice puppet, one of my favorites. It had 11 people in it, people carrying the puppet, but also there was somebody underneath with some thunder sheets, making a really nice effect. And then if you look carefully at the face of this puppet, you might see some string that goes across the top, because I was also inspired by the Northwest Native American tradition of transformation masks. And so I took this idea of this bear, which transforms at a certain point in the performance into a green man. So the face opens in 3, and then it's like the rain, it's like the spring coming. And so it was not just a puppet, but then it was also symbolizing that transformation. And then underneath it, we were backed up to a sort of a screen, and then underneath it, kids with sunflower hats ran out and had a little dance. I'll go back just in case you missed that. So there's the bear face, and you could see how it will split into 3 right between the eyes and the nose, and that comes up. And that was a fun puppet to make. Bit tricky because it was all paper mache, so it was a bit wobbly, but we got it to work in the end. At that point, I was in Seattle for about 5 years, but then I had a really wonderful opportunity. A friend of mine and a colleague who is British became one of the main artists in a company called Horse and Bamboo, and they did mask and puppet theater in Lancashire in the northwest of England. She invited me to be a mask performer for one of their shows. This is a show called Company of Angels, the story of Charlotte Solomon. And then this is me as the father character. And there I met Kathy, and that's the woman on the right of the screen. And she was also one of the performers and musician in the show. And we formed a professional and personal relationship. We started a bit of a long distance relationship. Then suddenly we got married, and then I moved to England. And then these are some shows that we did early on, and then eventually we formed a theater company called Thingumajig Theatre. This is one of our earlier works, a clown puppet show called Vertigo of Sheep. This was a show about World War I, and then Ugly Duckling, using some string puppets. But also at the same time, we were doing a lot of giant puppets because I really love to do stuff on the outside, outdoors. And over time, that sort of started to win out. Indoor shows, it's a little bit of a sad thing, but it's really hard to make a living doing indoor puppetry in the UK. Some people can do it, but there's not as many bookings and as many venues that take small-scale touring puppet shows in the UK. But we found that we had a lot more work in the giant puppets and doing work outdoors. And so we started putting more energy into that. And then over time, I'm sorry, I'm skipping ahead. Over time, that became almost all of our work. Another thing that I did, and I'll talk to you very briefly about, I also started a parade company called Handmade Parade. And this is my love of working in the community. And this is puppets, but also costumes and community ensembles. And we made both daytime parades and lantern parades. And that company, I ran that company for about 10 years, and then it became a little bit too much to run my own company, Thingumajig Theatre, and a parade company. And so I stepped away from that. And that company, I'm happy to say, is still carrying on without me at the helm. But now I'm focused exclusively on Thingumajig, our own puppet company. Oh, and that's for one of our lantern parade puppets from Handmade Parade. Now, I'm going to change tact a little bit and show you a little bit about some of the build process. I'm going to show you two different builds that I've made, and I've got some process pictures, because I bet some of you on this chat are probably makers as well. So this is a Viking girl. It was a commission that we made, and it's a one-person puppeteer, and her name is Kelda. And this is the process of how we made a giant puppet. The first thing we do is we'll make a scale drawing, and this is very important, especially when you're making a big puppet, because sometimes you might be working on the head over here and the hand over here, and you don't really get a sense of all of it until much later in the process. You don't want to get to the place where you put it together finally and you find that the hand is too big or the costume doesn't fit, etc., etc. So it's worth it to take the time to make a really good scale drawing. Oftentimes we do a 1 to 10 scale drawing, or 1 to 20 if it's a really big puppet. So you'll see on the scale drawing here, I draw the size of a puppeteer in scale drawing. So that might be, I'm about 170 centimeters or so. So I'll draw that person in and draw that person in the position that I think the puppeteer will be. And then from that, you can see the numbers there. And that's how I know how big the head is going to be, how long the hand is going to be, etc. And then you could also use this as a starting place to measure out how big the costume will be as well. And then to the right, you'll see that we have the head in a little bit more detail, so front and side view, and then we sculpt that onto clay. Inside the clay there, we'll have built an armature that's with wood and maybe some wire and some stuffed cans, etc., to create the volume so that it's not solid clay. And then, of course, we build the clay on top of that. Once we build the clay, sculpt the clay, and then in this process, this is a paper mache puppet, and so we will lay it up with paper mache, build alternating layers of different colored paper until we've built it up to the size that we want. Then let that completely dry. A giant puppet like this might take 7 or 8 layers of paper mache, and then of course it takes some time for all of that to dry. It has to dry completely. And then we'll cut it off or take it off the clay. You can see on the left that head you see where the black gaffer tape is. That's because it was taken apart and then the tape is used to put it back together, and then we paper mache between the tape pieces. Let that dry, take the tape off, and then finish paper macheing, and then you have it back to solid again. On the right, you could see the body being built. We use aluminum to make the backpack frame, and then wood and bamboo to create the shape of it. Now, going back, we're using that scale drawing to make sure that all the proportions are right. And then the white stuff there, that is nylon tubing, which is commercially made for like liquid, for like beer kegs and Coke machines. It's that sort of fairly stiff but flexible plastic tubing. And I find that that's a nice shaping for giant puppet bodies because it's quite light and it stays fairly robust. You could throw that in the van and not worry about that bending like you would with wire or something like this. And it's a little bit more stronger than sticks and a little bit lighter than bamboo. So we use that, and of course that's the body. And then here we're getting the head, and the hands are getting some paint there. And then I think the eyes in this one, because we want it to be nice and round, I think I put some polystyrene balls inside it and paper mache'd it. And then of course you could see the puppeteer using inside. The hands, actually, we put these rubbish grabbers so the thumb moves, but I don't think I'll do that again because that was quite scary for the kids. So I don't think I'll do the rubbish grabber again, but I would just wanted to be able to pick something up. Anyway, so, and also you'll just note, it's hard to see the picture, but you'll see from the elbow of the puppet, or rather where the hand control of the puppeteer is, you'll see a black string going into the shoulder, and that string goes to the back of the head. So the head is not fixed, but it's on a pivot, and it's naturally set. So the head is looking down, and so by shifting those two strings which are attached to the elbow of the puppet, you could have the head control going up and down. You'll see it in the video. Finally, I'll show you the pictures of the costume. You could see that the costume has a vision patch. One bit in the center in the chest is a little bit more translucent, and so you could see through it. And then finally, this is the puppet finished. And then I'm going to stop sharing. So Manish, if you could show the video of Kelda, please. Look for the head mechanism here, how it turns. Fantastic. All right. I'm going to go back to my presentation. Just one more build I wanted to show you. Get back to playing. Okay. So as I said, one of the things that I worked hard on this puppet was to figure out that head mechanism so that the hand of the puppeteer could not only control the head, but by pulling on the strings which are attached to the elbows of the puppet or the handholds of the puppeteer, we could control the head. Because one of the things that I think is important, I mean, of course, you're all puppeteers, so you all know this, but the focus or the gaze of the puppet is super important for that puppet to come to life. And so sometimes I feel like people, when they make giant puppets, they don't work as diligently as really getting that focus correct. And I think that is the difference between a puppet that's a big sculpture and a puppet that comes to life, which is that you're able to really control the focus of the puppet so that the audience thinks that the puppet is looking at them and responding to the stimulus around them. And so suddenly you get that double thing, like, wow, it's a big impressive thing, but actually it looks like it has thought and feeling and reaction to what's happening around it. And then of course that becomes that wonderful magic that we all love about puppets. The last thing I wanted to show you, and I promise we'll get to questions in a second, is I wanted to show you how we make some of the lantern puppets. So this, you'll recognize this because it was in the poster of this talk. This is a phoenix puppet that we made for the University of East London. I was working with some students as well as some local artists in East London. And their mascot was a phoenix, so they wanted me to make a phoenix as well. So once again, we start with a scale drawing, and I do apologize, this one, we didn't have any big paper, so we just used some cardboard, so it looks a bit rough, but it's the same principle, which is that we draw the puppeteer to scale first, draw the puppeteer for scale, and then you decide how big you want the puppet. And in this case, it was going to be outdoors. We wanted to have 4 or 5 puppeteers on it, so that was not a problem. And so we know the size of the doors, and we know where it's going to be stored, so we know we could make it this big. And so we drew it. And also there's a sweet spot for giant puppets, I think, which is that you around 3.5 meters is a very good, for me, is a very good giant puppet height, because it's very impressive, but it's not too cumbersome in the wind, it's not too heavy. Of course, sometimes we make puppets that are 4 meters, and sometimes we go more than 4 meters. But then at that point, I feel like you sacrifice some of the mobility because it's so windy, or rather wind sensitive, and it's also heavy. So I feel like, yes, you could make it 5 meters or 6 meters, but then it becomes more of a sculpture because there's not as much animation. Now, I know that there are companies like Royal Deluxe in France who have been able to, have really great articulations, but those have much bigger budgets than what I'm able to have. So I find that somewhere around 3.5 meters is a good giant puppet size, and so that's what I often go with. But of course, you can also make big puppets and put them onto wheeled structures so that you don't have to carry all that weight. But once again, that has a different effect. Great from the distance, not as impressive or not as animated up close. So anyway, sorry, that was a digression. So here you can see the numbers on the drawings. It gives us a really accurate sense. You could tell the numbers on the wings there, and then we take those measurements and then we transfer that onto a big piece of paper here. We're using bamboo here to give the strength. And then you could see the black marker line there, and that is the shape of one of the wings. And then once we do that, on the bottom right, you could see that we also make depth, because a lantern can't be flat, it has to have depth. So the light is in the middle of it, and then it spreads out. So sometimes when you make things like wings, which are in real life quite thin, when you make a lantern wing, sometimes you have to make it a little bit thicker in order to get a really nice glow. So after the wings, that bit of clay that you see on the left, sometimes from a 2D drawing, you can't necessarily get all the dimensions you need. So sometimes we make a little clay maquette, and then we can measure the depth at a certain point. And then from that, you could see on the right, and the pictures on the right, that we're able to shape the body. We're using here bamboo and willow withies. Willow withies is like a reed. It's like a material that we can get in England quite easily, that you use it for basket making. So far, what we decided to do here in India is that we're going to use split bamboo, because that's a lot easier to come by. And so we've actually had somebody here in New Delhi split a bunch of wood, split a bunch of bamboo at various thicknesses. I think we wanted something that's about 3 mil wide and about 3 to 6 mil, 3 mil thick and 3 to 6 mil wide. And then we'll be making the same sort of shapes, but with bamboo. Other places I've also used reed, rattan reed in the US. Sometimes that's easier to come by. And of course, you could do anything really that has flexible, but it also has a little bit of strength. You can make this kind of lantern shape. Once we make the shape, then we cover it with paper and glue, let that dry, and then we cover it with fabric as well, because if it's just paper, then it becomes very fragile. We're not sure what kind of paper we're going to use in India. In England, we use a thing called wet strength tissue, which is a tissue paper that stays strong when it's wet. It's used in the beauty industry. If it's used for perms, apparently you get, I don't have to get burnt, but if you do, you take this paper and you wrap it in and it holds the dye in, or the chemicals inside. I think we're going to try, I haven't done the experiment yet, but I think in India we're going to try some butter paper tomorrow. We've got some butter paper, the paper that you use to wrap butter in, and we're going to try that, and I think that might be strong enough. And then we also use a thin layer of fabric over that as a second layer, like cheesecloth or really loose muslin, and then we do paper on top again. And then we color it either with colored tissue paper. I think in India we're going to use kite paper, which is like the thin, almost like tissue paper that you would use to make really light kites. But also you could use paint as long as it's got a lot of pigment. Like you wouldn't want to use house paint, but you could use like watered down acrylic. I like to use Roscoe scenic paint, which has a lot of pigment in it, so you could add water in it and it still gives you a lot of color. You could also use dyes. Sometimes I use tissue paper because I think that's the best to get that translucent quality. And then we're not using this process in India because of the climate. I don't think we can use this material, but in this example, we're using a thermoplastic called Warbla, which is WORBLA, which is a plastic material that when you heat up with a hot air gun, it takes the shape. So it's almost like paper mache, but it's this kind of thermoplastic. So once again, we're making the armature. From the drawing, we made the cardboard silhouette in 2 dimensions, and then you're using cans to make the armature, and then we'll cover that here. We cover it with bubble wrap, and then finally we use the clay to make the shape. And then here we make a pattern off the clay, which is that we've used plastic bags and clear packaging tape, and then you could see the black lines there, and they are pieces that when you cut them off, they will mostly be flat, okay? Part of it is functional, but also part of it is the design. So you want to make the pattern so that, because wherever the pieces meet, there will be a dark place in the lantern. So you want to make that where the natural shadows would be on the puppet, or sort of make it swoopy, make it the lines really beautiful. And then so there we have the patterns. We make the patterns off the head, and then we transfer it on that brown sheet is the Warbla. Now, once again, we're not using this in India because apparently it's really hard to come by. It's very expensive, but also because of the climate here, that it's activated at about 90 degrees Celsius. But like if you were to leave it in a car in the summer in India, it probably would turn into mush and it would not keep its shape. So I think we're going to use the other type that we used for the body and the wings for the puppets here. But anyway, if you were in a colder climate, I do apologize, then you take that plastic and then you heat it up with hot air gun, and then you're able to make this shape. And then here you see, with colored tissue over it, we're able to add the color into the head, and then we paint it. And then of course, here's the finished head there. And the last little bit is the neck. Oh, no, I'm going to skip over that. Oh, I'm going to go back and talk a little bit about lighting, which is that we are using a 12-volt system, because the 12-volt batteries, the same as like a car or a motorcycle, but also nowadays you could get a lithium-ion 12-volt battery, which are very light. They're like almost like your phone battery, pack. And then they send 12 volts out, and then we get these little LED lights called G4, G like the letter and 4 like the number, and they're warm white G4 lights, and they're 12 volts. And 12 volts are the same that you might use in your car or a bus or a camper van or a boat. So there's a lot of 12 volt technology. In fact, you probably have some 12 volt in your house. A lot of LED lights are running off of 12 volts. And so if you wire all of these up to your battery, then you could get that nice warm glow. Sometimes we'll use connectors so that, for instance, in this puppet, the tail and the head come off. And so, you just, it's like a plug, like a domestic appliance plug. And so you're able to do that. This is probably a little bit more detail than you would need in an hour-long presentation. But anyway, you could ask me about it or ask Manish, and I'm happy to send this image over separately. Finally, the neck of the fabric is just fabric that we've dyed, and then we put colors that are similar to the colors that also let light through. And then here are actually two different puppets that we've made in two different workshops, the phoenix here, and then the fox that we also made. Okay? And I think that's my last slide, yes. And also, if you don't already, you could follow us on Facebook and Instagram, and also now TikTok, believe it or not, at and YouTube at Thingumajig Theatre, Thinguma Theatre. And if you're interested in the YouTube channel, has quite a few examples of our puppets, and also. And there's also a few interviews and that kind of thing. So you might, if you can't get enough, you could get stuff there. Instagram is the most up to date about what we're doing, but the YouTube has the most videos and examples. I'm going to stop sharing, and happy to take some questions. Oh, thank you.
Thank you so much, Andrew. Thank you. Lovely presentation. We have question in the chat box from Ranjana ma'am. What is the weight of Kelda puppet?
What is the weight? I'm sorry?
Of Kelda.
Kelda, oh. I don't know if I know the weight of it. It's quite light. Gosh, I don't actually know the weight of it. I never actually weighed the puppets, but I take pride in making them easy to perform in. Like, I'm not particularly a big, strong puppeteer, but I'm happy to perform it for an hour. It's not a problem. The head is paper mache. The head is probably the heaviest thing, even though it's just paper, but the body is very light. I think the ghost caribou are probably a little bit heavier, and it's not that they're heavy, it's that the weight is so far up so that if you lean a little too far, it's very top heavy. And with giant puppets, I think it's not, for us, of course, when you first make puppets, they're too heavy, and then you learn how to use different materials to make it light as possible. But I mean, I would probably say, maybe 10 to 15K or something like that.
No, I think it's a really beautiful puppet.
Thank you.
And very, very effective, exactly as you explained, that a parade puppet can be expressive, and you can actually catch the emotions much better in this scale and with this level of subtle movements. So it's a very successful puppet, I think.
Oh, yeah. Thank you. Thank you very much.
And I had another question, Andrew, and it's a little more detailed. I'm really fascinated by the whole idea of a community parade and getting community together to participate in the parade, participate in the making and doing something together.
Yes.
Especially in our very, very diverse country, where there's multi-layered rituals and everybody has their own style and, their own little boxes. It would be a challenge to get everyone together on the same page and do something together. So what is the process?
Yeah, this is a very interesting question. I feel like one of the things this is not my idea, but it's one of my favorite ideas for a parade. And this is something that I learned in Seattle from the Summer Solstice Parade, which is that in our parade, in the one that I started in Hebden Bridge in England, we do not allow any no advertisement, right. No written words, and no logos or icons.
Right.
So it's only a creative parade. And so, for instance, it gives you the opportunity for a lot of parades, you march with your sections, and maybe it's a school group, maybe it's a church group, maybe it's a mosque. But here, no, none of that. It's only about, okay, all the penguins are here, all the, wolves are here. And so suddenly, and people get to self-select where they want to go. And then suddenly you're not walking with the same people that you're used to associating with. You have a space, and also creating a space where people are all welcome to come, and they are all welcome to choose what section they want to be in. So suddenly in our community, you have old people working with young people, you have people with money working with people with less money, because they all want to be wolves,
Yeah.
If you come up with a good design and do the work so that people can succeed. So sometimes you have to make some examples, some templates. You have to make it really easy for people to succeed, but also give you enough opportunity so people with a bit more time and creativity can make something more elaborate. And so all of that, and then of course you have to have music, and I think there are ways. And of course, I don't know this culture very well, but I know that this was a really successful model for us, because the traditional parade in England was that you walk with your school, or you walk with your club, or you walk with your company. And if you take all the words and logos and religious icons away, and it's just forbidden, it's just illegal, you can't be in our parade, and then suddenly people have to find another creative way to be in it, and then suddenly it becomes a celebration of the creativity of the community, not just celebrating one element of it. So maybe that's one way to do it, and I could talk to you about that later.
Yeah, let's do that. I'm really fascinated by it.
Yeah.
Hi, I have one more question. Like you mentioned before, where did you start the workshop in Bali about the wood carts and also the traditional dancing? So do you still remember the place?
Yeah. Well, I studied with a gentleman named Ida Bagus Alit, Alit. Unfortunately, I think he's a little bit older now, and that was quite a few years ago, but I think he has started a school. If you go to the Ubud, UBUD area, slightly south of Ubud, there's a community called Mas, M-A-S, and those will be the best, they are famous for the best mask makers and performers. And if you go and start asking, there are a few people that actively teach both carving and making. You have to be a little bit careful, and you have to make sure you ask a few different places, and also because sometimes if they see a foreigner, they, just to be honest, you have to be careful.
Thanks. It's really impressive about all your sharings and work. Shortly introduce myself. I'm Sun, and I'm from Estonia and China. And I do animations, like a puppet animations. So like a small size of puppet, but also get really inspired of your work. Thanks for sharing.
Thank you. Were there any? Okay, I have a question here. On the chat? Jayanti asks, is the puppet waterproof? That's a very good question, because of course I make puppets in the north of England, and especially in the winter time, it rains a lot. And so is the puppet waterproof? Not exactly, but we do all that we can to make it water resistant. So even the paper mache puppets, we will put several layers of varnish on it. And so it's not exactly, it's more like water resistance, shall we say, than waterproof. So we could perform in a light rain, and that's okay. Like the dodos, they've been wet many times. And then you just have to make sure that you wipe it dry, and then when you store it, that you can never store it when it's still damp. You have to let it dry completely. And then even if it gets a little bit soft, when it dries, it'll get really hard again. Both with lantern puppets and paper mache, as long as you know that when they're wet or damp, they're very, very fragile. So you have to be careful. And of course, fabric is fabric. If you get it wet, you get it wet. But as long as you lay it out, and you do have to really be careful if you're not careful with wet puppets, they will get moldy, especially if you're somewhere, that's damp. and like England, or probably in parts of India as well. You have to watch out for the mold. Are there any other questions anybody?
Yeah, we have a question from Anna. Anna, can you please unmute and ask your question?
Oh, can't hear you, Anna.
You mute Kusma.
Yeah, Anna is here.
They are unmuted, but it doesn't seem to be working. Okay. What?
I'll read it.
Okay. Anna says, didn't understand the weight of the weight of I wasn't talking in kilograms. So probably about, I don't know, I think it's about 10 to 15 kilograms, which is what? I don't know, 25 pounds if you're in a place where you're using pounds. But that's just a guess. I don't actually know. Thank you so much. Is there anybody else? Any other questions?
Oh yes, I do have.
Yeah.
I was just wondering that the materials you said was about paper mache more. What are the other, because there are lots of trashes around. Is that any possibility of building with them also?
I'm sorry, lots of other
Trash material that we throw away as a waste.
Yeah. So my favorite material to make a puppet, especially a giant puppet, is paper mache, and that will be, for me, that is sort of heavy brown paper. I usually try to get two different kinds of paper, and you just have to make a test with what you have available. So this will be heavy brown paper, like maybe you get in a grocery bag, or sometimes to wrap packages, this kind of paper. So it's not like office paper, that's too thin. Newspaper is too thin, so it's just some slightly heavier paper. And then I like to get two different colors, because then lets you keep track of what layer you're on. Now, are there other material? And also for the glue, you could use a few different things. Sometimes I use wallpaper paste mixed with a little bit of PVA or wood glue. I can't remember what we call it in India, but there is the kind you use not for schools but for wood. That sort of glue. But also, if you use cornstarch, I often use cornstarch or corn flour. If you boil water. You take some cornstarch, it's 1 to 10, 1 part cornstarch or corn flour and 10 parts water. You mix the corn flour with some cold water. You take the 9 parts of water and then you boil it till it becomes really fast. And then you pour the cornstarch in very slowly, and it makes a really good glue. Much better than flour and water. I know some people use flour and water for a paper mache. But as far as other materials, yes, of course, you could use anything for a puppet. Like, for instance, we often use cardboard, make things out of cardboard, and then put 1 layer of paper mache over it. If you want more details, you could take some newspaper or toilet paper and sculpt details with a bit of paper tape, masking tape, and then paper mache over that. That's a really fast, cheap way to make giant puppets. However, I find that our giant puppets we want to use for many years, and cardboard doesn't last. Cardboard is good for a 1 parade or maybe 1 year, but then after that it falls apart. So I think paper mache, I've had paper mache puppets that I've used for over 20 years. So it's, as long as you know how to treat it, it's fine. And then of course, sometimes we use plastic cans, various things, but you have to be careful when you make junk puppets, because junk puppets suddenly get really, really heavy.
Yes.
Because you have to choose really, really light materials, and sometimes you have to use a bit of money in order to get the really, really light and durable materials.
Thank you. I have one more question. Are they dismantled, like you can remove it and fix it up kind, or it is fixed once and then it is done?
For what kind of puppet?
The puppets, the giant puppets you made,
Yeah.
are they separable? Like you can separate them?
Yeah, for sure. Puppets, if you want them to last, you have to be able to take apart the head, the hands, the costume. It's very good to be able to take the costume off, because then in the transport and storage, that's when puppets get damaged and dirty. And so sometimes the head will have we'll sew a bag for the head. The costume will be in a clear plastic bag, so that when we're getting around, and sometimes we might be working on a dirty surface, we have to just be really careful. And then also you have to really think about where you're going to store these puppets. And so you have to make, like for instance, the workshop that I'm teaching tomorrow, I find that I have a normal size door. So even though we're making a big puppet, every piece has to be only 80 centimeters wide or something. So this is going to add a lot more work for me, but it's something that you have to do sometimes. You have to know the size of the doors. You have to know the size of your van. You have to know the size of your storage before you make any design choices.
Thank you.
You had a question. I want to go back to somebody. Was it Muskan? Muskan?
Yeah,
Yes.
I had a question, but I think it was about like using different materials, like natural materials. But one thing that came to my mind was that, from the conception of the idea and, maybe the inspiration to actually making the puppet and performing, on an average, how much time does it take for you to go through that whole process?
This is a good question. I think if I were to, it depends on the complexity of the puppet, as far as oftentimes it's about how many moving parts does the puppet have. If it's just a simple puppet, it might maybe take a week or 2 weeks. If it's a more complicated, it might be a month, maybe a little bit more of a month. And it also, sometimes I'll be working just me and my wife, Kathy. Sometimes we'll get a commission and we have to do it in 2 weeks, so we might have more colleagues come in and helping us. It's all very, and then sometimes at a busy time, we might have to go and perform every weekend. So it actually takes much longer because it's never, ideally you're just doing one thing at a time, but it's never the way with a professional puppeteer. Like I have to do the emails and the phone calls and make a plan for, this project here that I'm doing here in Delhi. I've probably been talking to Anurupa for 2 years, making plans, getting ready for all the things. And of course, so it always takes a long time in advance. But actually, the making of the puppet might be anywhere from 2 weeks to 6 weeks.
Thank you.
Yeah, we have another question in the chat box from Kanishk. Is it possible for me to join the workshop tomorrow in New Delhi? I would really love to. Didn't come across the poster earlier. I think the registration is closed. So
But that's a good question, Andrew. That's a very
Yeah, I'm sorry. I have to admit that I'm not. I haven't been any part of the registration. I think that has been done by Anurupa, who runs Kata. And so, yeah, it has been, I think it is full. I'm afraid it is full. I like to limit my size because I feel like if it gets too big, then you won't be able to really learn from it. But those of you who are in New Delhi, on the 17th in 2 weeks, on the 17th, we will have our presentation at the British Council, and we can invite puppeteers, local puppeteers, to come and see. And then, of course, on the 19th and 20th, they'll be part of a larger performance. And so come and look for it. So, but I'm afraid we're full up on the workshop, but you can definitely see the puppets.
yeah, and there is another workshop by Andrew in South India, like Kerala, which is in Ella Center for Culture and Alternative Education.
This is worth asking. I actually don't know if that's full or not. So that's worth asking. You know what? I'm going to maybe if you have Manish, you have the email list of everybody, right?
Yes, I have.
Yeah, so I will put a little note about the Kerala workshop and also about the 17th. So basically, if they come, I don't mind if you send them my email, and then they could ask me, and then I'll go find out. I don't have the details. I don't have the information right now, but I could find out for you.
Right. And another question from Anna: where are you based in England? North England?
Yeah, we're in West Yorkshire. So we're based in Hebden Bridge, West Yorkshire, which is somewhere between Manchester and Leeds. But, you know, we sort of go everywhere, you know, as a lot of puppeteers do, you know, we're sort of itinerant. But my first time to India.
Yes. And another question from JNP. In Dodo puppet, what kind of sound instrument in their mouth?
In the dodo, oh, so we use kazoos. It's just a little bit, you know, it's a bit silly, but sometimes it just helps with the animation, so it gives them a little voice. It's just but we have a little portable MP3 player that plays some music, so it gives you a little ambiance, and then we talk as if we're these silly kazoos.
So would you call it a swazzle? Is it like a swazzle?
It's like a swazzle. It sounds like a swazzle, but it's like a kazoo is like a plastic tube with a little membrane, a little plastic membrane. A swazzle is the thing that goes inside. Those scare me. I don't know how they do that. The Punch and Judy professors use the swazzle, don't they? Yeah.
New message.
Oh, great.
Who is organizing in Kerala? It is Allah.
Allah, ALA Cultural Center. A man named Manu holds Josie. Yeah. But I will send me an email and or message me on social media. Yeah, I could probably actually
And now we can, I think, switch on your video, please, so that we can have a screenshot.
Manish.
And it's a wonderful
Manish, I think Gundaraju sir has something to say.
Manish,
yes,
केरला में वर्कशॉप कहाँ चल रहा है वो?
आला ALA.
नहीं, जगह कौन सा है, कहाँ पे है?
Kochi. It's in Kochi.
Cochin.
Yes.
Okay, I'm just putting Manu's email in the chat.
Any more questions to Andrew?
Good. You know everything.
Lovely.
No, there's a possibility. Is one who has it's something like if you know everything, you cannot ask. If you don't know anything, also you cannot ask. So I think the other way around also is possible.
Yes. Okay. Well, thank you everybody for taking the time to see my puppets and listen to me going on.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much joining today. And
Bye-bye.
we can take a screenshot if you can switch on your video for a minute. Saying puppetry. Okay, lovely. Thank you so much. So we are privileged that we have Gundu Raju sir, our Honorable President of Unima Puppeteer Trust India, and we have our Managing Trustee in the audience also, Ranjana ma'am, and another trustee, Padam Shri Dadi Padamji in the audience. So we are honored to have you. 7th edition of Anubhav. So those who are still connected and want to connect and know more updates about puppetry and training programs or seeking membership to get in touch with the wider network of puppetry. So feel free to write us on our official email, that is puppeteertrust@gmail.com. We are also present on our Instagram, Facebook, by the name of @puppeteertrust.
I think Dadi has raised his hand. Manish.
Yeah, Darisa, you want to say something?
No, I'm seeing I'm on two names here because I was running two Zoom meetings at the same time. There was another Zoom and there's one on my phone going on.
Dadi, we know that.
You raised hand in which? In ours or in their
part
other
of
meeting?
that, Ranjana, you were spoken about that. It was a Unima meeting with Karen. So
very distracting.
It wasn't chatting, it was much more. I'm sorry I missed, but I'm sure I'll come to the workshop and have a look at what's happening. And if any of you are in Delhi day after tomorrow, our Ishara group is performing at Sri Ram Center, a new performance. So if any of you are in Delhi, it's an open, it's free, in memory of Kirti Jain's mother. And yeah, please come. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. So we come to the closure, Manish.
Yes, we can conclude.
Thank you so much, Andrew,
Everybody,
for
gonna
this
take a
alignment of
screenshot.
giant puppetry. Thank you, one and all, for joining. Bye-bye. Take
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Bye, everybody. Thank you very much.
All in. Okay. Thank you. Thank you, sir.
I'm just gonna.
I just stop.